You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Marada movement leader Sleiman Frangi meets with Maronite Patriarch Bshara and says he will not withdraw his presidential bid. ISIS fighters keep up their fierce defense on the southern approaches to Mosul, which has held up Iraqi troops on the southern front. And France begins the long process of taking down the so-called jungle migrant camp, forcing nearly 3,000 migrants to leave their makeshift shelters on the outskirts of Calais. We begin our newscast with news of an incident along the Blue Line in which an Israeli soldier was wounded by gunfire that Israel says originated from Lebanon. The shots were reportedly fired from the vicinity of Kfar Kila on the Lebanese side. Head of the UN's interim force in Lebanon, Major General Michael Berry, immediately contacted the two sides to control the situation and prevent further escalation, urging both sides to exercise maximum restraint. UNIFIL spokesperson Andrea Tenenti is on the line with us for more details. Hello, Mr. Tenenti.
Yes, hello, good afternoon.
How are you doing today?
Good, thank you very much.
Can you tell us what exactly happened today and how did it all begin?
Well, at the moment, the information we have is that we were informed today by the IDF through our liaison and coordination channels that an IDF soldier south of the Blue Line in the general area, as you mentioned, of Kfar Kila Metula, was hit by a small arms fire originating from the vicinity of Kfar Kila. The IDF, we were also informed that they returned fire. UNIFIL Force Commander, head of mission, urged the party to use maximum restraint. At the moment, we have UNIFIL troops deployed in the area, and in coordination with the LAF, UNIFIL has launched an investigation, of course, to ascertain the circumstances of the incident that occurred in the morning.
So far you have absolutely no information about basically why why there was a fire this morning. Why did they fire a bullet then?
Yeah, and actually I would like to emphasize the fact that the information we received are information we received from the IDF. We are looking at our own information. That's why we launched an investigation in coordination with the Lebanese army to ensure that to make sure that we are looking for the information and ascertain the situation after this alleged incident. But as I said, at the moment we are still looking into that. Important to emphasize also that the force commander has immediately contacted the parties to help control the situation and prevent escalation of the situation. So the situation at the moment is stable.
Can we fear a further escalation of events which could potentially lead to another 2006 war, you believe?
Well, we have to look at the situation on the ground at the moment. The situation at the moment is stable. As we mentioned also in the past, the situation has been stable for a long time, and no one wants to change the stability that we were able to preserve together with the parties for the last 10 years.
That was UNIFIL spokesperson Mr. Andrea Tenenti. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Marada movement leader Sleiman Frangi says he will not withdraw his presidential bid. Frangi's statement comes after a meeting with Maronite Patriarch Bshara, which reportedly tackled the general developments in the country. Rai, who has frequently decried the presidential vacuum now in its third year, has been urging rival political leaders for more than 2 years to elect a successor to former President Michel Sleiman, whose 6-year term ended in May of 2014. The founder of the Free Patriotic Movement, MP Michel Aoun, has the support of some members of the Future movement, as well as the Lebanese forces, Hezbollah, and some of its March 8 allies, giving him a sufficient number of parliamentary votes for his election. The upcoming election is set to be held on Monday. Coming up next, U.S. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump says Democrat Hillary Clinton's plan for Syria would lead to World War III. Stay with us. Welcome back. ISIS fighters kept up their fierce defense on the southern approaches to Mosul, which has held up Iraqi troops on the southern front and forced an elite army east of the city to put its more rapid advance on hold. 10 days into the offensive, Iraqi army and federal police units are trying to dislodge the militants from villages in the region of Shora, 30 kilometers south of Iraq's second largest city. The front lines in other areas have moved much closer to the edges of Mosul, the last major city under control of the militants in Iraq, who have held it since 2014. The elite army unit, which moved in from the east, has paused its advance as it approaches built-up areas, waiting for the other attacking forces to close the gap. Syrian refugees in France's jungle refugee camp say they fear long-term separation from their family members who have reached the UK as authorities continue to dismantle the settlement. About 40 Syrians are holding out in Calais, once home to around 10,000 people from the Middle East, Africa and Southern Asia. France began its eviction of the jungle on Monday and has transferred thousands of its inhabitants to reception centers across the country. Refugees protested the dismantling of the makeshift camp by setting it on fire. Julie Nost reports.
This used to be the shopping street of the migrant camp known as the Jungle in Calais, France. Migrants who've been living in the sprawling and unsanitary port of entry to Britain are being moved as officials close the camp. But before leaving, it's tradition for migrants to burn their tents and shelters, despite being told not to. A regional prefect official said fire services and paramedics are on the scene, so the risk of the fire spreading is low. But they've told us it's a very established tradition. When you go, you burn. Migrants fleeing poverty and war outside Europe have, over the past few years, congregated at Calais in the hope of finding new lives across the short stretch of sea. And they're still coming. Over 4,000 people have been registered by the French authorities since Monday, with the majority bused to reception centers across France.
The United Nations likely refused to accept legal responsibility for a cholera outbreak in Haiti that has killed thousands in the past 6 years because it was a position pressed by the United States. Haiti was free of cholera until 2010, when UN peacekeepers dumped infected sewage into a river. Since then, more than 9,000 people have died of the disease, which causes uncontrollable diarrhea, and more than 800,000 people have fallen ill.
The UN has opted to abdicate its responsibility. It refused to accept factual responsibility for the introduction of the epidemic, contested the scientific evidence on the basis of a self-evidently flawed and unjustified assessment, insisted that no legal claim for negligence could be brought against it, despite the clear provisions of the relevant treaty and its agreement with Haiti, refused to countenance the payment of any form of compensation, even to the relatives of those who have died, issued no apology, and did not do enough to promote and strengthen efforts to achieve eradication. There is reason to believe that the position adopted by OLA in 2013 was consistent with views strongly pressed at that time by the United States. The reason behind the US position seems to be that the UN must follow American legal practice, which generally takes the view that legal responsibility should never be accepted when it can possibly be avoided, because one never knows the consequences for subsequent litigation. The SG himself has complained bitterly about being subjected to inappropriate pressure from certain member states and has named those states on occasion. This seems to be another area where there is pressure from one particular member state, and it seems to be so great that the Secretary General has concluded that he doesn't have room to do what I think he believes is the right thing, and I deeply regret that.
U.S. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump says Democrat Hillary Clinton's plan for Syria would lead to World War III because of the potential for conflict with military forces from nuclear-armed Russia. In an interview focused largely on foreign policy, Trump said defeating Islamic State is a higher priority than persuading Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to step down, playing down a long-held goal of U.S. policy.
That's a lack of respect for our country. We've been with them forever. And that is one of the truly most important strategic locations anywhere in the world. People don't realize how important strategically the Philippines are. Did he actually make that statement? Well, he probably made a deal with China, because he left for China, and he's dealing with China and Russia. Well, the Philippines are a very important strategic location. He has no respect or liking of Obama. You saw that 2 weeks ago when, the trip was canceled and the things he said. I want to see how the feel is of the people, because I want to find out whether he's representing the mass, the majority of the people. I think it's a horrible thing that the United States is reduced to being thrown out of a country. Well, she has no plan for Syria, and look, with her you'll end up in World War III. She doesn't know what she's doing, just like with Libya, just like with everything else she's done. So Syria now is no longer Syria. Syria is Russia and the new Iran that we built through the Iran deal, which is one of the worst negotiated deals I've ever seen. What we should do is focus on ISIS. We should not be focusing on Syria.
Well,
you'll end up with her plan. You'll end up in World War III with Syria. You're going to end up, Steve. You're going to end up in World War III over Syria if we listen to Hillary Clinton. She's incompetent. Well, Syria is fighting ISIS also. I say the first thing we have to do is get rid of ISIS before we start thinking about Syria. The president missed his time. If he wanted to take Syria, he should have done it a long time ago when he drew the line in the sand. That's when he should have taken care of Syria. If we had party unity, we couldn't lose this election to Hillary Clinton. And I do have party unity at the base. We have more unity probably than they've ever seen. But if the Republicans could come back into the tent, we could not lose this election. I think we'll get along well with the Democrats, and I think we'll have legislation passed with Democrats, unlike now where, Obama just signs executive orders all day long.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Marada movement leader Sleiman Frangieh meets with Maronite Patriarch Bashar al-Assad and says he will not withdraw his presidential bid. ISIS fighters keep up their fierce defense of these southern approaches to Mosul, which has held up Iraqi troops on the southern front. And France begins the long process of taking down the so-called jungle migrant camp, forcing nearly 3,000 migrants to leave their makeshift shelters on the outskirts of Calais. Those are your top stories for this Wednesday. I'm Linda Tamim, and I thank you all for tuning in this afternoon. See you tomorrow.